I never thought I would be the kind of man to question everything. For years, I trusted without hesitation because that is what love looked like to me: steady, reliable, and built on a foundation that did not shake. I was never the jealous type, never the guy who checked his wife's phone or second-guessed where she was going. That kind of suspicion always seemed beneath me. Looking back, maybe that was my first mistake. It started on a quiet Sunday morning. We were on the back porch, drinking coffee like we always did. The sky was clear, the air was crisp, and everything should have felt peaceful. But something was off. Anna, my wife, sat across from me, scrolling through her phone, barely paying attention to anything else. That was not unusual. Everyone gets sucked into their screens these days. But the way she was smiling at whatever she was reading, the way her fingers tapped quickly across the screen without sharing a word with me, sent a strange feeling crawling up my spine. I told myself it was nothing. What was I supposed to say? Hey, you're texting too fast, so I am suddenly suspicious. That would have made me sound insane. So I pushed it aside, but then it kept happening. She started spending longer hours at the gym. Not just an extra 15 or 20 minutes. Sometimes she would be gone for 2 hours, coming home flushed and full of excuses. Spin class ran late, or the trainer kept me after for some extra stretching. Maybe I would have believed it if she had not suddenly taken such an intense interest in fitness after years of avoiding it. One night, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I was not planning on snooping, but when I glanced over, something made my stomach drop. The screen lit up with a message from someone saved as DT. Just initials. And the text? Thanks for tonight. Looking forward to tomorrow. I froze. She had told me she was at the gym late. Something about an intense new class. Stretching. Now that word felt like a damn joke. I wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation, but I could feel in my gut this was not nothing. This was something. That night, I lay awake while she slept beside me, completely unaware that her world was starting to crack apart. My mind raced, piecing together the little details I had ignored. The way she had been dressing differently. The sudden interest in her appearance. The subtle distance between us that I had chalked up to stress or routine. I had a choice to make. I could confront her right away, demand answers, and watch her lie to my face. Or I could find out the truth on my own. The next afternoon, I made a decision I never thought I would make. I installed tracking software on her phone. It was easier than I expected. Just a simple app that mirrored her messages, GPS locations, and activity. I told myself it was temporary, that I just needed to prove to myself that I was being paranoid. But deep down, I knew better. That night, while she was busy in the kitchen, I finally checked my phone. And that is when everything changed. The app had already gathered enough data to destroy whatever hope I had left. There were messages from DT. Lots of them. Some short and vague, others dripping with flirtation. Then there were locations, places she had been that had nothing to do with the gym. And the worst part? A photo. She was in workout clothes, her hair tied back, smiling at the camera. But she was not at the gym. She was standing outside of a hotel. And whoever was taking that picture was him. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting in a way I had never felt before. The evidence was all there. This was not just a suspicion anymore. It was real. A new message popped up on my screen. Same time tomorrow. Tomorrow. She had plans tomorrow. And now so did I. That evening, I said nothing. I sat at the dinner table while she hummed softly, cooking like it was any other night. She was completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. She talked about her workout, how David, her trainer, was pushing her harder than ever. I watched her closely as she spoke, waiting for any sign that she knew I was onto her. But her voice was steady. Her eyes never wavered. She had become an expert at deception. And I had become a man with nothing left to lose. After dinner, I sat on the couch, phone in hand, pretending to scroll through social media. I could hear her moving around in the kitchen, washing dishes, humming softly to herself. Every now and then, I glanced up at her, debating whether I should just say it, just drop the truth on the table and watch her try to pick up the pieces. I know what you're doing, but I held back. Not out of fear, not even out of hesitation. I wanted more than a denial. I wanted to leave her no way out. That night, I barely slept. I lay next to her in bed, listening to her even breathing, wondering how she could rest so easily while I was drowning under the weight of what I knew. My mind ran in circles, replaying our years together, trying to pinpoint when she had changed, when I had lost her. Had she ever really been mine to begin with? The next morning, she followed her routine like clockwork. She kissed me on the cheek before leaving for the gym, the touch of her lips barely there, like she was afraid of getting too close. As soon as she was out the door, I grabbed my phone and opened the tracking app. The messages were already rolling in. At first, it was small talk, something about how sore she was from yesterday, about needing extra motivation today. But then I saw his response. "Did you bring the special outfit?" Her reply came with a winking emoji. My stomach clenched. I did not need to see the pictures. I did not need the details. I already knew. I watched the location tracker as she drove. She passed the gym, no hesitation, no detour, just a straight shot across town to an address I recognized immediately. A small, out-of-the-way boutique hotel. The kind of place people go when they do not want to be seen. I gripped my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. This was not a theory anymore. It was real, right in front of me, undeniable. I could get in my car right now, drive there, and confront her on the spot. But what then? Would she cry, beg, say it was a mistake? Would she blame me for being distant, for not paying attention? I knew the script. I had seen it play out in movies, heard the stories from friends. No, I was not going to let her spin this into something it was not. So I waited. Every few minutes, I refreshed the app. Her location remained pinned at the hotel. Time crawled. 30 minutes. An hour. 2. Finally, she was on the move again. When she walked through the front door, she looked radiant. Her skin had that slight glow. Her hair was a little messy, like she had just been through a workout. In a way, I guess she had. "Good session?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead, smiling. "Yeah, it was a tough one. David really pushed me today." David, her trainer. I bit the inside of my cheek to stop myself from laughing. This woman stood in front of me, lying so effortlessly, weaving her excuses like it was second nature. I stood up, grabbing my keys. "Where are you going?" she asked, her brows knitting together in confusion. "Just need some air," I said. I did not wait for a response. I drove aimlessly for a while, my mind spinning with possibilities. I had proof, but confronting her was not as simple as I had thought it would be. If I did it now, she would deny, lie, twist things around until I was questioning myself. No, I needed more. This was not just about catching her. It was about making sure there was no escape. By the time I got back home, she was in the shower. The sound of running water echoed through the house, but did not drown out the noise in my head. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone on the nightstand. It was right there. I could pick it up, unlock it, read every message. But I already knew what I would find. She stepped out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, her hair dripping. She smiled at me like everything was normal. But nothing was normal anymore. I stood up, brushing past her without a word, heading to the living room. I needed space. I needed to think. She was playing her game. She just did not know I was about to play mine. The next morning, I woke up early before she did. The first light of dawn crept through the curtains, casting a soft glow across the room. She lay next to me, sleeping soundly, her breathing slow and peaceful. And for the first time, I did not feel anything for her. Not love, not sadness, just cold, quiet anger. She could lie to my face, but she could not outrun the truth. And soon, she would know what it felt like to lose everything. I sat at the kitchen table, watching her move around the room like it was just another ordinary morning. She poured herself a cup of coffee, completely unaware of the storm brewing right in front of her. How many times had we done this? How many mornings had I sat here, drinking coffee with the woman who was lying straight to my face? She turned to me, mug in hand, and gave me that soft, easy smile. "You're up early again," she said, taking a sip. "Yeah," I replied, my voice steady. "Got a lot on my mind." She nodded, not pressing for details. She never really did she? As long as I was predictable, as long as I played my part, she never asked too many questions. That was the difference between us. She had always underestimated me, assumed I was too busy, too distracted, too trusting to notice. But now, the roles had flipped, and she was the one who had no idea what was coming. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, placed it on the table, and slid it toward her. She glanced at it, then back at me, confused. "What is this?" she asked. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "Go ahead. Read it." She hesitated, then picked up the phone. I watched her expression change as she scrolled through the messages, the same ones I'd spent the last few days staring at. I saw her grip tighten around the phone, her knuckles turning white. The casual morning ease drained from her face, replaced by something else. Panic. "Nathan," she whispered, using my name like it was some kind of shield. "I can explain." I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. "No, you cannot. You can lie, you can twist things around, but you cannot explain this away." She set the phone down on the table, her breathing uneven. "It is not what you think." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Oh, it is exactly what I think. You were not at the gym yesterday, or the day before that. You were not working out with Eric. You were meeting him at that hotel, sneaking around, lying to my face, acting like everything was normal while you played house with another man." Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a brief second, I wondered if they were real. But then I remembered who I was dealing with. "Please," she said, her voice trembling. "It was a mistake. A mistake," I repeated, shaking my head. "A mistake happens once. This was a choice. Every text, every meeting, every lie. You chose this, Sarah." She flinched at the sound of her own name. Maybe it was the first time she had truly heard it in weeks, without the sugar-coated lies wrapped around it. I leaned forward, my voice low but sharp. "How long?" She swallowed hard. "A few months." I clenched my jaw, the confirmation still hitting like a gut punch, even though I'd already known the truth. "What?" She looked away, wiping at her tears. "I do not know." "Bullshit," I snapped, slamming my hand on the table. She jumped. "You know exactly why. So say it." She shook her head, sobbing now. "I was lonely. You were always working. You stopped paying attention to me, and I held up a hand, cutting her off. "So that is it? That is your excuse? You felt a little neglected, so you decided to blow up our marriage." "It was not supposed to happen," she whispered. "Yeah, I bet," I muttered, standing up. I paced the kitchen, running my hand through my hair, trying to push down the boiling anger inside me. "Nathan, please," she said, her voice desperate. "I love you. I never stopped loving you." I turned to face her, my expression blank. "You do not do this to someone you love." She got up, reaching for me, but I stepped back. "Do not," I warned. Her face crumbled, the reality of what was happening finally setting in. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I exhaled, shaking my head. "You tell me, Sarah, what exactly do you expect me to do? Pretend this never happened? Go back to how things were before? Wake up next to you every morning, knowing you were in another man's bed the day before?" She wiped her face, but the tears kept coming. "I did not want to lose you." I laughed again, but this time it was colder, emptier. "You already did." Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. "I will pack my things," she finally whispered. I nodded, the finality of it settling over me. "Good." She stood there for a moment, staring at me, like she wanted to say something else. But there was nothing left to say. She had made her choices, and now I was making mine. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there alone. I did not look back. I did not need to. This was the end, and for the first time in days, I felt lighter. She flinched at my words, her fingers gripping the edge of the table like she needed something to hold on to. "I know how it sounds," she whispered, "but it wasn't supposed to be like this. I didn't mean for it to go this far." I shook my head, biting back the anger rising in my throat. "You keep saying that, but it did go this far, didn't it? How many times, Sarah?" She looked down at the table, silent. That was all the answer I needed. I exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over my jaw. "Was I just some idiot to you? Did you laugh about me with him? Joke about how clueless I was?" Her head snapped up, her eyes wide. "No, never. I swear, Nathan, I never wanted to hurt you." I let out a bitter chuckle, shaking my head. "You didn't want to hurt me, but you did it anyway. And then you lied. Over and over again. Tears streamed down her face, and she wiped at them quickly like they were an inconvenience. I was lost, okay? She hesitated, struggling to find the right excuse. I was unhappy, and I did not know how to tell you. So, instead of talking to me, you turned to him? My voice was calm, but the weight behind it was crushing. She swallowed hard. It wasn't like that at first. I scoffed. And what exactly was it like, Sarah? You met him at the gym, and suddenly, you needed a hotel room to discuss fitness tips. Her breath hitched, and she covered her face with her hands. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to understand. But I swear I never stopped loving you. I slammed my hand on the table, making her jump. Do not say that, I growled. Do not sit there and tell me you love me when you have been sneaking around behind my back for months. She sobbed harder, but I felt nothing. Not pity, not sadness. Just emptiness. I will do anything, she choked out. Please, Nathan, just tell me what you want. I will fix this. I stood there, staring at the woman I had once built a life with, and realized that no matter how much she begged, there was nothing left to fix. She had shattered us, and no amount of glue would ever put the pieces back together. What do I want? I repeated, my voice eerily calm. I want you to leave. She blinked at me, like she had misheard. Leave? I nodded. Pack your things and go. Today. She shook her head rapidly. No, please. We can. We can what? I snapped. Go back to normal? Pretend like I do not know that every time you kissed me, you had just come from his bed? Her face crumpled in agony, but I didn't care. Not anymore. I took a deep breath, forcing my hands to unclench. You made your choice, Sarah. Now I'm making mine. Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. Finally, she nodded, her body trembling. Okay, she whispered. I will go. I watched her stand up, her legs shaky like she could barely hold herself together. She walked past me, heading toward the bedroom. The moment she disappeared down the hall, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It was over. And yet, as I stood in that kitchen, surrounded by memories of a life that was never as real as I thought, I couldn't shake the bitter truth. I should have seen it coming. But now I knew better, and I would never make that mistake again. I sat there on the park bench, my breath fogging in the cold morning air, staring at nothing in particular. The truth sat heavy in my chest, suffocating, crushing. I had spent years believing in something that never truly existed. The woman I had loved, the life we had built together, it was all a lie. And the worst part? She would have kept it going if I had never found out. She did not regret what she had done. She only regretted that I knew about it. That thought alone made my stomach churn. I ran a hand over my face, exhaling slowly, trying to process what came next. Leaving wasn't enough. Walking away like some wounded animal wasn't enough. She had gotten away with this for too long, and she needed to feel what it was like to lose something that mattered. Because I mattered. By the time I walked back home, the morning had settled into a quiet rhythm. The sun had fully risen, the neighborhood coming to life. I stepped inside, and there she was, standing in the kitchen, gripping a cup of coffee like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her eyes darted to me the second I entered, wide and desperate. You came back, she whispered. I didn't respond right away. I just stared at her, at the woman who had broken me in ways I never thought possible. I need answers, I said finally, closing the door behind me. Real ones. No more I didn't mean to, or it was just a mistake. You owe me the truth. She swallowed hard, nodding. Okay, she said, setting the coffee down. Ask me anything. I walked over, standing just a few feet away. Did you ever plan on stopping? Or were you just waiting for me to catch you? Her lips trembled. I thought about stopping, she admitted. But she hesitated, as if the words physically hurt to say. I don't know. It was easy. The lying, the sneaking around. It became normal, and I convinced myself that as long as you didn't find out, it wasn't hurting anyone. I let out a bitter laugh. Not hurting anyone. I repeated, Sarah, you destroyed me. You destroyed us. And for what? Some cheap thrill? The attention of another man. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, looking away. I don't have an excuse, she whispered. No, I said. You don't. The silence stretched between us, thick and unbearable. She took a shaky breath. I love you, she said, her voice cracking. I know you won't believe me, but I do. I never stop. I stared at her, at the woman who had shattered my trust, and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just exhaustion. Love, I said quietly. You don't do this to someone you love. She flinched like I had struck her. I stepped back, suddenly feeling like I could not be in the same space as her. This house doesn't feel like mine anymore, I said. Everything about it is tainted. She took a hesitant step forward. We can fix this, she pleaded. We can go to therapy, work through it. I shook my head. No, you can work through it. You can sit with what you have done and figure out how to live with it. Her breath came out in short gasps. So that's it? You're just walking away? No, I said. I'm making a choice. The same way you did. You chose him over me every time you answered his messages. Every time you met him in some hotel room. You made your choice, Sarah. Now, I'm making mine. She covered her mouth, sobbing quietly, but I didn't reach out to comfort her. I couldn't. I turned toward the hallway, grabbing a duffel bag from the closet and tossing in some clothes. I wasn't going to spend another night under this roof, not with her. Please, she begged, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't stop packing. I zipped up the bag, slung it over my shoulder, and headed for the door. You should start packing too, I said flatly. Because the next time I come back here, I don't want to see you. She gasped, her hands shaking. You want me to leave? This house is mine, I said. Everything in it is mine. You don't belong here anymore. She stood there, frozen, and for the first time since I had confronted her, I saw fear in her eyes. Not fear of losing me. Fear of losing the comfortable life she had built off of my trust. I opened the door, stepped outside, and let the cold air hit my face. It felt fresh, new. She had made her bed. Now, she would have to lie in it alone. And I was finally free. I stood there at the window for what felt like an eternity, watching her taillights disappear into the distance. A part of me had expected her to turn around, to fight harder to stay, but she didn't. Maybe she knew there was nothing left to salvage. Or maybe she had already made peace with the idea of losing me. The house felt empty now, quieter, but the kind of quiet that settles after a storm. Messy, heavy, filled with debris. I exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over my face as I tried to process everything that had happened in the last few hours. She was gone. For good. I should have felt relief. Maybe a part of me did. But there was something else, something sitting deep in my chest, making it hard to breathe. Was it regret? No, not regret, just exhaustion. The kind that settles into your bones when you've carried something too heavy for too long. I walked over to the couch and sat down, staring at the space where she had just been. The ghost of her presence still lingered. The faint scent of her perfume in the cushions, the indentation where she had sat, the memories of all the times we had been happy here. Before everything had unraveled, I wasn't naive enough to believe that things could have gone any other way. This ending had been inevitable from the moment I discovered the truth. But endings, no matter how justified, still hurt. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, staring at my phone on the coffee table. A part of me wanted to pick it up, to scroll through old pictures, to remind myself of what we once had before it all fell apart. But I didn't. What was the point? Nostalgia wouldn't change the facts. Instead, I grabbed the phone and did something else. I deleted her number. Then I went to my photo albums and started erasing the past, one picture at a time. The vacations, the holidays, the candid shots of us laughing at some inside joke that no longer mattered. With every deleted image, I felt lighter. She had been a part of my life for so long, woven into every detail of my daily routine. But now, she was just a name, a mistake, a chapter that had finally ended. And then, the final step. I opened my contacts, scrolled until I found his name, and pressed delete. Mark, the so-called best friend who had smiled in my face while sneaking around behind my back. I had wasted years of friendship on a man who never deserved it. The moment his name disappeared from my phone, it felt like a weight had been lifted. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at him. Not at her. I was just done. I sat there for a while, staring at nothing, letting the silence settle around me. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't waiting for another lie, Another excuse, another betrayal. It was over. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, grabbing a glass from the cabinet. I poured myself a drink, not to drown anything, not to forget, just to mark the moment, to let it sink in that I had survived the worst of it. I raised the glass slightly in the empty room. To new beginnings, I murmured. Then I took a sip, the burn of the liquor grounding me, reminding me that I was still here, still standing. And that was enough. For now. The hours crawled by at first. I cleaned the kitchen, wiped down the counters, and tossed out the half-finished cup of coffee she had left behind. It was ridiculous, really, how something as simple as a coffee mug could carry so much weight. Just that morning, it had been part of our routine. Now, it was a symbol of everything she had taken for granted. But no amount of scrubbing could erase the memories that clung to my mind. The laughter she had shared with him, the messages, the meetings in places I had never known about. The way she had kissed me goodbye before heading straight into someone else's arms. I checked my phone out of habit, even though I already knew what was there. The messages, the photos, the proof of her betrayal. They were still saved, a cruel reminder of what had been lurking beneath the surface of our marriage. My thumb hovered over the app before I finally did what I should have done hours ago. Delete. Gone. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the blank screen. It didn't undo what had happened, but at least it stopped me from reopening the wound over and over again. But as I was about to put my phone down, a thought hit me, one last thing to set right. I opened my photo gallery and selected a few key images, the ones that mattered. A picture of her outside the hotel. Screenshots of the messages where she had spelled out, in no uncertain terms, how much she had enjoyed her time with him. I transferred them to my email, staring at the draft I had begun to compose. I had no intention of sending them to her. What was the point? She knew what she had done, and I had no desire to hear more of her lies. But he wasn't going to walk away from this unscathed. I didn't know much about Eric's personal life. He was just a name, a face, a temporary thrill in her world of deception. But guys like him never exist in isolation. He had someone, somewhere, who believed in him, who trusted him, just like I had trusted her. It only took a quick search to find her. His wife. She was there on his social media, smiling beside him in family photos, looking at him like he was her whole world. I wondered how long she had been in the dark, how many lies he had told her to keep his double life intact. I copied her email from his page, pasted it into the draft, and stared at the send button. Was this about revenge? Maybe. Was it justice? Absolutely. Because if I had been in her position, if the roles had been reversed, I would want to know. I would want someone to tell me before I wasted another second of my life on someone who didn't deserve it. I pressed send. The email vanished from my screen, and just like that, it was done. I leaned back, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I had been holding. My hand was steady, my heartbeat even. I didn't regret it. Not for a second. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I turned my phone off, unwilling to listen to whatever fallout had begun on the other end. She would know soon enough that her carefully constructed world had collapsed. She'd either blame me or herself. But the truth was, she had no one to blame but herself. That evening, I sat on the porch with a cold beer in hand, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The air was cool, crisp, the kind that hinted at the changing seasons. The quiet wasn't suffocating anymore. It wasn't the silence of betrayal. It was the silence of peace. A few days ago, I had been lying awake at night, tormented by the suspicion that something was wrong. Now there was no more guessing, no more wondering. I had faced the truth, no matter how ugly it was, and I had walked away from it. My phone buzzed beside me. I glanced at it, but I didn't pick it up. I didn't need to. I already knew it was her. Maybe she had realized just how deep she had dug her own grave. Maybe she was desperate to fix something that couldn't be fixed. Maybe she was angry. It didn't matter. I took a slow sip of my beer, letting the bitterness settle on my tongue. It was fitting, but it wasn't permanent. This was just the aftertaste of something I had survived. As the last light of the day faded and the stars began to appear, I stood up, stretched, and walked back inside. The house felt different now. Not empty, just waiting, and so was I, for something new, something better, something real.